I think a lot of people are impressed by the idea of patching live, but there's really nothing risky or inherently confident about patching live. I think that once you understand what the parameters are doing, then there's not really so much of a difference between patching live or flipping a switch. It's really a means of allowing everything to be connected to everything else. So a kind of infinite modulation matrix, whereas in a enclosed, pre-patched synthesizer, you have whatever options they've made available and you dig through some kind of menu to find all those options. Whereas here, you see what you want plugged in to what you want and you plug a cable between them. And so rather than thinking about the modular interface as being something that is intimidating, it's more like something that is neutral and allows whatever to happen in an unrestricted way.
What's up, everyone? Today I'm somewhere special. I am visiting Berlin and I am visiting the workshop of Verbos Electronics. This is Mark. Mark, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Mark Verbos. I'm an American, but I live in Berlin for the last about 10 years. In this facility, we design, build, test the Verbos Electronics products. And I am actually a musician doing live performances, primarily improvised live performances, since way back. And the products that I design are all informed by that experience as a performer. So a little bit of how I would like it to work is like this, so what if kind of thinking.
Cool, so live performer and then this brand of modular that you design and make yourself.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. I think on this channel I've shared a bit that in the last year, 2 years, I've been dabbling in modular, set up live sets to do like improvised live techno. So I'm kind of getting my feet wet in this area. Could you tell me a little bit about your practice and maybe how you play or what kind of tools or processes? How do you think about it?
I did my first live performance, also techno, in 1992. So obviously things were quite a bit different back then.
5 years old.
But at the time, there weren't as many things to choose from. So in a way, this was in the beginning largely analog or entirely hardware.
Yeah.
But largely this was due to the fact that there weren't that many choices, not so much because of a preference.
Yeah.
And I'm always quick to say that really what's important is the interface and the workflow. So in the end, analog versus digital isn't so important to me, more about from the user perspective, how the things work and if they're encouraging or inspiring to use. So in those really early days, I was using, well, the very early days, the first performance I ever did, I was just using an Ensoniq ESQ1, an Alesis MMT8 sequencer, which is a quite simple MIDI sequencer with buttons to turn on the tracks, and an Alesis HR16 drum machine, which ironically, now, the last time that I brought it out to show off how terrible it is, everyone in the room was like, wow, that actually sounds really cool. So now it's gone so full circle that now it's like, it's a cool thing to use. But at the time it was definitely like not particularly good or interesting. This was just what I could afford as a teenager. And also before I really got clued into like what everybody's using or what the star pieces of history are.
Yeah.
Because it's also, let's not forget, there was no internet. So
clear.
The information that I had early on about how to make music or how to make electronic music, how to record all these things. Later, I went to school for recording engineering and worked in a recording studio. But as a teenager, everything that I knew came from magazines, from Keyboard Magazine or Electronic Musician or whatever. So they were in no way clued into how anybody was making, techno music in Detroit or whatever.
Yeah, right.
That was really deeply on the periphery. So around that time, after doing the first couple of performances, then I met some people who were 10 years older than me who were DJs and would say, you know, this, what you really need is a 909 or this kind of thing. So then I started to evolve. By the mid and later 90s, I was using like these kinds of things, Roland XOX series boxes, and actually I'm still using the 909 to this day, continuously since then.
Yeah.
But there was even a period where I'd switched to using a sampler, where I would make sample sets, like a key split with a different sound on each key, and then use that set to make a whole bunch of different sequences, and then the live performance would be to introduce those parts in an improvised way. But that was when it started to become clear to me that the more that I was trapped into like planning ahead, then the more limited I was going to be in what changes or like how I could be inspired in the moment. So that was the foundation for me to start thinking like, what if, you know, maybe I would prefer if I had, you know, like I would use a Roland MC202, but the only way to program the sequencer is to stop it, program something, and then start it again. So I would do that by you know, unplugging the same cable, programming something while other stuff is playing, and then plugging it back in, and then having to stop and start in order to bring it back in. So then, you know, it's quick for me to think, I wish, you know, what if I could make some sequencer where I could do everything on the panel? What if I could not have anything prepared the night before or the day before or whatever, that I had to then, you know, try to figure out how to apply that to the situation.
Because it's all live, all improvised, right?
Yeah, so the more that I could go in the direction of having a blank slate at the beginning, the more ideal that would be for me. So ultimately for me, what we make here is modular, but I'm not slavishly committed to modular either. I'm not, you know, like I said, I'm not slavishly committed to analog. I'm not slavishly committed to modular. It's just, for me, design-wise, it has to be all there available, not through a menu. It has to be what you see is what you get. You know, the idea of synths where you have knobs for all the functions, but you can save the patch and then bring a patch back, and the knobs are showing you something unrelated. That doesn't work for me. So
I'm so happy you say that. There's even something like a Prophet synthesizer. I've got the Prophet Rev 2, but none of the knobs ever reflect the sound that is coming out, and so I don't have the muscle memory of tweaking it, because I'm like, it's always one step of abstraction too far to be satisfying.
When like at Super Booth or something, I'm doing presentations and somebody else has been on the synth, and then I bring someone over and say, let me show you the new module, and I can't figure out why no sound is coming out. Like what is connected here? That's basically the same feeling as you know, bringing up a preset. Like, why is there modulation on the pitch and you can't figure out where it is or what's going on? So for me, particularly in the context of the improvised live performance, but actually all the way across the board, if I was, over the years, I've been engineer and producer and player on all sorts of other kinds of music, and a lot of times in collaboration situations. And there is very little chance that when I'm in the room with 2 or 3 other people where you know, we have momentum going, that I would then say, why don't I bring out this modular and see if there's anything that I can do that's going to fit in with this songwriting process, you know, and derail the momentum. But then the question is, what if there was a way that I could make an interface that I could then go toward ideas that I have? So rather than a modular being something that you think about as this esoteric, I don't even know what's going on, I'm just plugging in, going crazy until something cool happens and then recording that. What if I could have ideas and go to those ideas and then move even farther down the line, which is to go away from trying to sort of compete with DJs and queue up the next thing that I'm going to do on a headphone so that when I bring it in, it's the way I want. What if I could get to a point where the interface makes so much natural sense for me that I can get really to where I want to be without even listening.
Yeah.
And then when I bring it in and something about it isn't what I thought it was going to be, I can change that.
Like one knob away. Yeah.
Because any traditional instrument, you are interacting with it in a way where when you hear that, when you put the finger down on the violin and you hear that you're flat, you move to make it on pitch.
Sure.
So we need to have that kind of control in electronic things too. We can't just fool around and hope something cool happens, because that's not how you can improvise in front of people, and that's not how you can collaborate with other people. So you need to be able to express ideas that you have, and you need to interact in a positive way with the instrument so that you are inspired to do other things. That ideas are fueled from it rather than hoping that some happy accident gets you to the place that you're going. Also wrapped up in this philosophy of interface and the concept of putting together an instrument that is really suited to the performances. That within the modules there's a language of signal flow, and this concept comes from my idea that the music is coming from the performer out. And so within each module, the inputs are at the bottom and the outputs are at the top. But universally, the system is put together in this way. This is kind of addendum, but within the concept of the system is that the sequencer and envelopes and control voltage processing are closest, and it flows up. The oscillators, sound generators are here, and then it's moving to the right until it finally reaches the top right where the final mixing is, and it's going out to the world.
So up and to the right.
Yeah. So,
Interesting.
and that flows in each module, but also in the whole system as a whole. And it relates not just to the laying out of the panel of a design, but also the putting together of a system.
Yeah, this reminds me of like in acoustic jam situations where all the instrument players will have perfect dynamic control over their instrument, so they can make an accent or crescendo or decrescendo or do something soft and respond to each other. And it's quite a distance from how many people have their electronic instruments with sequencers that are running at a certain constant intensity. And like, I think one of the goals for me as well in an improvised modular setting is to have that kind of dynamic level of expression over my instrument as well, so that, you know, if you do a swell on your instrument, I could also do a swell, and you could have this back and forth conversation.
Well, wrapped up in that is the question of what does it mean to improvise? Because for some people that means that they don't have the same arrangement, which was me 25 years ago, you know, to be introducing the preset things that I did from before, but introducing them in a different order, or in the mix of
sort
how
of
they're going
the stems
together.
of something.
Yeah, and so, you know, there could be a circumstance like the first time that I ever came to Berlin in 1998, I was playing in a club called SO36 on a Monday night, which was crazy already for me that this party would go until like 8 o'clock in the morning on Monday night. But when I was playing live and setting everything up, and I asked the guy from the club, what's my set time? Because, you know, somebody, when are you on? I'm like, I don't know, what's my set time? And he said, well, your first set is at 1. And I was like, first set? And your second set is at 5. Now, I've been doing this a long time, and I've never on any other occasion heard of 2 sets of a live performance.
Same.
But given that at that time I was using this system of sequences that I'd prepared, sample set that was there, in theory I had 1 set that I could do. I mean, there was some flexibility, but, you know, I wasn't completely free.
You're going to be reusing elements then if you have to do it.
I had to reuse elements, but then I reinterpreted the situation, and I can honestly say the second set was the better one.
Right, yeah.
That the night had, gotten to a point where the tourists were gone or whatever, it had gotten to like a different place in the night. And I wanted to take it to a different place that wasn't what I planned, to like go deeper or more atmospheric or whatever. And so it changed the tempo and broke up things to be more minimal and like change the amount of effects that I was putting on them. And so I think that, you always have these things at your disposal, but what if you didn't have just this one little bit of it, but you have the whole, the whole world of possibilities available to you, that you could not only change how much effects were there, but any idea that came to your head, you could drop in there. But the only way that's possible is if you have an interface that allows you to predictably know what you're doing and what you're getting, and that you develop that relationship with that interface, like the same way that when you play a trumpet, that you spend time. Yeah. It's only 3 valves. It's easy, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So, it's a common misconception that you don't have to learn how to play an electronic instrument. That, in the 80s, the new bands that came along or making electronic music were criticized. They say, it's so easy, you just push a button and the music comes out. But somebody had to come up with those ideas, and somebody had to learn how to bring ideas out into finished music.
Sure.
And so as a musician, that's what I'm chasing. And as a synthesizer designer, that's something that I'm trying to empower myself as a musician with, and also anybody else who's using it, that they can participate in this process of going toward ideas and expressing their ideas through music. So rather than just make something that makes crazy sounds that you might be able to capture, but it's really the instrument's agenda that you're just joining up with. Yeah. It's actually a flexible platform for you to express your ideas, and that you can from there then go in whatever direction hits you in the moment. Because to me, improvisation is show up with nothing and see where it goes. And sometimes that means introducing unexpected curveballs just to create an atmosphere where then I'm pushed to that limit in order to be deeply engaged and digging deep.
I remember we were talking earlier a little bit about improvisation more generally, and I shared that I've been doing improv theater, right? And the situation you got in with the 2 sets problem reminded me of a moment in improv theater where one of my teammates walked on, and then as they were about to speak, our coach was like, whatever you had in your head, don't do that. Do a different thing. Yeah. And I was like, whoa, okay. And then it snaps you into the moment, and it brings you into this like vital not knowing, and then you discover something new, And it sounds a little bit like that, where you had this thing prepared, and then it's like, well, okay, you've done that. Now do something else with the same tools.
Yeah, I mean, tonight you two are going to switch which roles you're playing.
Yeah. Exactly.
And sometimes the problems, like when you're doing live performances, some people will say, "Are you afraid that something isn't going to work?" And I say no, because there's always something that isn't working. There's, really the whole process is overcoming whatever isn't working the way that you thought it would, or that for some reason today this drum machine isn't syncing to that thing, or who knows. But what I've often found is that when in my mind I had the most catastrophic experience, like where everything was going wrong and I was desperately trying not to drown the whole time, the people seemed to be the most enthusiastic about what I did. So I think there's something about being in that headspace of like desperation. It's miserable to be there, but I think it gets great results sometimes.
Yeah, I think something about the uncertainty makes you very awake in the moment, and people can sense that. I would like to think that people can sense that.
Or they don't know what they're listening to, and they would like it no matter what you do.
Agreed. I remember in one of I think it was Why We Bleep or Tape Notes podcast, that Tony Surgeon was saying that like often when things start to fall apart in his live sets, that he'll just like see how much he can let them fall apart for, instead of trying to fix them and go on to the next idea. He'll like let the whole thing crash and then rebuild from there.
I think it's really hard. I mean, to me, the hardest thing to learn was to let it be. Because as you're standing there in front of people all watching you, the immediate nervous reaction is, let me just keep changing things to see if I can, impress them or something. Like, I don't think they're liking it. How about if I change it more? How about if this is so boring. I need to get things happening. But the realization that if you listen to recordings, they don't change very much at all. Sometimes it's the boldest move to just let it be.
100%. And so this ethos, so you started designing your own tools, right? And so could you give me like maybe a little bit of a concrete example of how this philosophy or this intention manifests in the tools?
An example of how the interfaces that I've come up with, or how new ways of approaching things. I guess the most obvious example is in the sequencers. So the sequencer that's in my system is called the voltage multistage.
Okay.
And the concept behind that was to build on some of the existing vintage ideas. For the way that I came into music electronics really was through collecting old synthesizers. And then I got into, I met somebody who was 20 years older than me, who was more of an expert, 20 years more experience of working with synthesizers than I had, who, this guy named Grant Richter. And he, at the time that I met him, he had been collecting Buchla instruments from the 70s. He collected them in the 80s when no one wanted them, and then fixed the ones that he had, and he'd found so many of these through universities and whatever that he convinced all of his friends to like have them. But then if anybody had a Buchla instrument in those days, he was the one that they contacted to fix it, because he was the only one who really knew anything about it. And Buchla had moved on from making instruments by that point. So I got the opportunity to use those instruments, and I was just starting in electronics, so he then acted as a mentor to me in electronics. But then as time went on, he kind of passed the torch to me of being the acting specialist for the Buchla instruments. So then I was fixing them for whoever had them. And in that process then got some vintage Buchla stuff of my own. So the combination of the experience using that stuff, which was designed in the early 70s, was definitely not designed with the kind of music production that we're doing in mind, but was interface-driven design. That conceptually, Buchla believed that you should design what you want the instrument to do, and then make electronics that do that, which is a bit opposite of everybody else. So my combination of aesthetics, which was the experience with the Buchla instruments, the experience using the more conventional techno type instruments, TB303, SH101, this kind of thing, and my desires as an improviser was that I wanted to harness these ideas from these kind of unrelated camps and bring them together into my way of working. So the concept really is foundationally built on everything is on the panel. And that could mean that it's on a knob or a switch or whatever, but it also could be on a jack, a cable connects. But more than that, people like to break up modular synthesizers into East Coast and West Coast. And this stems from the very early days of synthesizers, that the only two makers in 1965 were Moog on the East Coast of the United States and Buchla on the West Coast of the United States. But really, this classification is bullshit. So
okay.
Because fundamentally, it's built on this division, and wrapped up in that is much more. That the East Coast instruments had organ, piano type keyboards, and the West Coast instruments had touch plates and sequencers. The East Coast instruments had ADSR type envelope generators. The West Coast ones had either really simple attack release or multi-stage, more complicated things. But basically what it comes down to is that the West Coast, Morton Subotnick commissioned the creation of the first instrument that Buchla did. And his music is experimental. You know, it sounds like... So he specifically didn't want an instrument that was capable of making music that we already know. He wanted to be forced into making something new.
Yeah.
Whereas Moog was trying to make something that could be used by a band or a movie composer or whatever. So fine, but then when you have other brands like, you know, ARP, they say it's East Coast. Well, yeah, it is East Coast. But Surge, everybody says that's West Coast. Okay, well, what does Surge have in common with Buchla? It's weird. That's pretty much, and it's from California, but it uses banana cables.
Right.
But the fundamental concept behind the Surge system was to break down into the simplest pieces possible that you have to patch program into something complicated. It's almost like you're building the circuit yourself when you patch it.
Yeah.
So much so that there'll be a module that could be a VCO or a filter or an envelope or an LFO or you can do any module imaginable using this one thing. But none of them are going to be intuitive, and none of them are going to be musical to you. It's, you know, trying to memorize how to patch this to that to this to that in order to get it to happen.
Yeah.
And Buchla, his concept was to make an interface and make a synthesizer, you know, that backed up that interface. So I would, instead of dividing it up in this way, I would divide up the concept into micro modules and macro modules.
Okay.
Meaning, micro modules, meaning modules that do really simple functions. And then you would use a lot of those patched together in order to create something musical. Macro modules, meaning effectively there is a patch going on behind the panel that already gets you a good bit of the way toward making something musical with it.
Yeah.
And that's the world that I'm a part of.
It's a beautiful design language you've got going on. The consistency of the modules is really beautiful.
Well, a funny thing happens when you start a synthesizer company. You have to make a lot of decisions, you know, like what colors you're going to use or what types of panel controls you're going to use or what sort of metal or, you know, printing or painting or whatever you're going to use. And then you have to sort of live with those forever. Not that I regret it, but just, you know.
If you'd chosen a different color today, which color would it be?
No, I still believe in the color scheme, but actually my friend, you know, maybe a year into this, I talked to him on the phone and hadn't talked to him in quite a while, and he said, "I'm really impressed with what you're doing, but I just have one question. Why would you choose red?" I mean, I guess everybody has some color they like and some color they don't like, but it'd be so emotional about that. You know, hiding in there is also, in addition to the concept of designing interface for workflow or interface for interface sake. Also hiding in there are references to the history of synthesizers and to
Gotcha.
the pedigree or where it comes from. So the knobs that I'm using here are from Rogan Corporation, which is where the blue and red knobs that Buchla used came from. So it's like, you know, somehow related, but not exactly the same. You know, it's a.
This Buchla lineage is very nice. Gives some history to everything.
But you know, the unfortunate part of that connection is that there were people early on whose interpretation of what I'd done was that everything is a Buchla clone, which is certainly not the case. To a large degree, it was what Alessandro Cortini described as a combination of Buchla and techno. So it was more of like taking the seeds of those ideas and then moving them forward more to like workflow that related to what how I would see using this in the context of what I was or am doing musically.
Incredible. So my shameful admission is that I have never had the privilege of using one of your modules before. I've never even gotten a chance to play around with them. So I don't know what I'm looking at.
Well, that's the best position to be in some ways.
Yeah.
Clean slate.
Well, I'm excited to get initiated. So please.
So what I was talking about earlier, the voltage multi-stage. So that's a sequencer with some interface elements that allow a lot of different tricks to be done with it, but all right there on switches and jacks. Then this is the sequence selector is an analog sequencer, sort of, but it is used generally in collaboration with another sequencer to either offset sequences a little bit like an arpeggiator.
Right, like a chord progression, kind of changing the root notes-ish.
Or to select from multiple inputs going to one output, or to jump between preset selections.
A dumb question, your sequencer has 10 steps, so it's an unusual design.
It's funny that you say that, because we haven't even announced it yet. That was the video. So the voltage multi-stage, the original one, was 8 stages long.
Right.
And was in here until this week. The original is 8 stages long, and then we, a couple of months ago, released the 16.
Ah, right there.
But in the process of going from 8 to 16, rather than just double the length, we added a couple of new features.
Gotcha.
And among those features is the fact that now there are stage select gate inputs. If you wanted to make a sequence that went from, for instance, if you wanted to make one go from like 7 to 3, you would do it like that. This strobe input, at the moment that a pulse goes into that input, then it jumps to whatever stage is selected by the analog address.
Oh, all right. So, okay, it's going back and forth there. Yeah. Ah, okay. So in this sense, you can make okay.
So, but now because we added the stage select inputs, now you can go with the stage output to the stage input, and then you can loop from anywhere. And what that actually, a really interesting thing that allows is for us to have multiple loops that at different times in a track can jump between those multiple loops. And that those times could even be like within one measure. So you could have like your drum machine engaging like 3 times of that loop and 1 time of the other loop or something like that.
Interesting. Okay, I've never seen that before.
We released 16 with the gate inputs, and there's another feature that I'll show you that's kind of interesting too. And then it became obvious at that point that we couldn't keep making the old one without the new features. So the evolution to the new design with these new functions also meant that we crunched the size down a little bit in order to fit into this space. So then in the same amount of space, either it was going to be 4 HP, HP is the way you measure width in a Eurorack synthesizer. Ultimately, we would have ended up with 4 HP smaller of a module, or 2 more stages. And so I went with 2 more stages because I think that there's something cool about the fact that it's an unexpected number.
It is, it's memorable, definitely.
And it is, in a way, a reference to the very first homemade synthesizers that I ever did were sequencers, and they were built around the 4017 decade counter, which this is a chip that is a 10-step long sequencer.
Interesting.
So my first things I ever made were 10-step sequencers, and so this is in a way a reference back to that.
That's so cool. I love the bit of nostalgia and like how personal that is. That's fun.
And I think in a way it encourages a little bit more outside the box thinking, because we're so trapped in like analog sequencer, playing 16th notes, 8 or 16 all the time. Yeah. So the fact that it's 10, shakes it up a little bit.
I love, like, there's a bit of a duality there in that, like, the design is so, in a sense, like industrial and precise and almost like engineer-like, but then the design decisions have quite a lot of poetry in them. Like that's quite an emotional decision to make 10, and that's I like that duality between the two.
So probably our most popular module is the harmonic oscillator. So the concept here is that there's an analog oscillator core that puts out triangle, square, and saw, like every oscillator. But then the triangle wave is sent through a series of wave shapers that fold that wave up to multiply it by 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 all the way up to 8. And then there are sine wave converters. So you have sine waves for the first 8 harmonics. That isn't that interesting on its own. In a way, this just sounds like an organ. So but where the action is how you blend together those harmonics dynamically, because every sound in nature changes its tonality or its spectrum or its timbre or whatever as the notes play in some way. It starts bright and gets darker or whatever. So in a conventional way of thinking, we do that with a filter. We take a saw or a square or some rich harmonic wave and then filter away parts of it. And maybe you have resonance on the filter to make like meow, meow, meow. But this is additive synthesis. I mean, it's very, very simple additive synthesis, but nevertheless, it's additive synthesis. So the way that we make something interesting then is that we dynamically change what the mix is. Quite cool if we use an envelope generator. So now, these controls allow us to mix those harmonics together a little bit like the way that we might think of a bandpass filter as having a center frequency and a band width. So we can use this concept of additive synthesis then to do the kinds of sounds that we expect from a low-pass filter on a wave, but we're just using 8 sine waves and mixing them together. In this process, as they mix, the volume gets louder and louder and louder until it starts to clip.
Sure.
But that kind of becomes just part of the character of the harmonic oscillator, this way that it clips, and then the way that clipping, where the focus of that clipping is, on which harmonic is pushing it over the edge. And here, we're just plugging the envelope generator into the width input. So that it's opening up all the harmonics at the attack phase and then closing down to just the lowest ones as the notes go on. And then a really funky thing we can do with the multi-envelope, because we have multiple outputs from the envelope generator happening at the same time, we can make it so that this top one is delay, attack, decay, sustain, release.
Gotcha.
So like a ADSR with a delay phase. And then the second one down is attack, hold, decay, sustain, release. So an ADSR with hold time. But the same sliders control both of those shapes. Okay. So the top output is holding in silence at the beginning when this, for the length of time related to this, and the second one is already attacking and then is holding at the peak while the first one is attacking. So using then the balance of this, we have one of them going to the amplitude, to the volume of the sound, and one of them going to the filter, or in this case the width of the harmonic blend. And we can shape the attack to be this whoop, 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 whoop thing, which I think is pretty cool.
And so I see that a lot of the design sort of follows sequencers and sort of tonal elements, or can be atonal. But how about percussion? Do you do any? Do you do any drum modules, or?
I don't separate in that way. If you can of course use these to make percussive sounds, and the majority of percussion sounds are based on noise elements. So if we were to use some of the noise elements that we have here, a really nice way to do it would be to use the bark filter. So this is going to use what's called called metallic noise, which is 6 square wave oscillators that are randomly distributed frequencies that are then ring modulated against each other to create as much atonal cluster of frequencies as possible. It's familiar to most people as the way that the cymbals in an 808 are made. So if we were to What's interesting about this, the concept of making drum sounds out of synthesizers, is that you're not constrained by the normal parameters. Like if you were to use like a I don't know, a TR-606 to make this, uses the same technology of a bunch of square wave oscillators and some bandpass filters to make these cymbal sounds. But in that context, you only get whatever they gave you in terms of how long they are. And really all you have is like a closed and open in a 606. You get this mid one where you put them together. But here you could actually do something like, we have this pattern going, and then we could, with the CV, program or
Oh, wicked.
or we could we could within it program different decays or different
Sure.
levels of kind of velocity in a way.
Is it fair to say that, like, if you want to deliver a techno set with this, you would probably also incorporate a drum machine externally?
I do, but within that context, I also pretty often do percussion sounds or additional things, a lot of times based on these simple noise sweep concepts, like using the fluctuating random that I used before as a modulator. I'll use it sometimes like this as a sound. So now we're actually hearing the fluctuating random. We're sweeping the frequency of the fluctuations, which is effectively like filtering noise. And that has a lot of, even though it's simplistic, it has a lot of flexibility in the tone, like how you can get it to sit in together with more conventional drum machine tones.
For sure, it seems like a nice, nuanced, like, motif that would complement, that would sit very nicely over a four on the floor, kind of more traditional structure.
Exactly, and then the introduction of those variations, like that's where the 10
Anytime anyone does a 10-step polymeter, they can just be like, this is the Mark Verbos polymeter. Thanks for showing me all this, man.
No worries. I mean, it's I think that a lot of these ideas are overlooked, and they're simple and they're right there. So for most people, the distance between where they are and being comfortable using something like that in a live situation is really just a little jump.
Right.
But just the fear of the unknown is keeping them from taking that chance.
This has been super nice. I really, really enjoy the aesthetic of it. I love the sounds that come out. That drone was wicked earlier. I really want to get my hands on some and mess around with it and see what comes out. It's been lovely to dive into your world, man. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.